Welcome to our series of Healthcare Scene Google Plus Hangouts, where we sit down with top leaders in healthcare IT. My name is John Lynn, founder of healthcarescene.com. Thanks for joining us. Before we begin, I want to remind those watching live that you can submit any questions you have for us on the Google Plus event page. We'll try to incorporate it if we have time. Today, we're excited to sit down with Charlie Saponaro, President and CEO of Medical Record Associates. Charlie Saponaro is an experienced entrepreneur with a proven track record of both operating and investing in growing companies. Prior to Medical Record Associates, Mr. Saponaro was a key member of the Archives One management team. While Archives One, Mr. Saponaro was instrumental in growing the business from a regional company to the third largest records management company in the United States before being acquired by Iron Mountain. I'm really pleased to have you here with me today. Welcome.
Great to be here, John. Thank you for having me.
Great. So today's topic is kind of the future of HIM, of health information management. So let's start off the top with, what do you see as the major trends happening with HIM departments today?
Well, I think it's a really interesting time for the HIM industry, and you have the obvious transition to the electronic medical record, but in addition to that, I think you're also seeing increased specialization within the areas of HIM, whether it's coding, release information, cancer registry, whatever falls under that particular department at that facility. And I think you're also seeing more scrutiny in those areas, whether it's scrutiny on coding, revenue cycle, privacy, whatever it may be. And in addition to that, you're getting with the adoption of the electronic medical record, more virtualization too. So a lot of trends going on.
Interesting. So, I mean, you bring up that, probably the biggest thing that's impacted the HIM departments is this shift to electronic environments, and obviously the EHR being the core of that. How has that impacted HIM departments? Is it good? Is it bad? What are HIM people thinking about this EHR world?
Yeah, it's certainly been a shift. At the same time, I would say most facilities are still operating in a hybrid environment because, let's say they switched over to an EMR or changed their system last year. Everything prior to that, or a lot of things, may still have been in hard copy form. And the cost to convert that, to scan it into electronic format, is very costly. So you're working in a hybrid environment, and you probably will be for some time as that trails off. As far as the different changes with the electronic medical record, it depends on the facility and how many systems they have. Ideally, they've got one system, but there are some where they've got 5 or 6 different systems, and it can actually take more time, frequently than less, to go in and look at or gather information. So, in some ways, the hard copy record can be easier, but there's certainly advantages with having electronic format as well.
It's interesting. I actually thought you meant the double work as far as you have to go find if there's a paper chart, you got to go see if there's an electronic, but you're saying there may even be 5 electronic records. Is that right?
Well, there's frequently different databases or different types of systems that they'll have. And so let's say, in the release information area, they've got to put together a record for a request. They have to go different places, log into different areas, gather that information, and put it together. And it takes more time than if you had a hard copy record.
So it's interesting in this kind of hybrid environment, because you're right, the majority of them haven't paid to scan it. We still have to go pull those paper charts, which, credit those HIM professionals that still know how to find those paper charts. To me, that's magic. But
right.
Is the person that was great at organizing paper charts and that's able to validate the record before it's sent out and all of those things, is that the right type of professional for this new electronic world, or are we going to have to see a shift in the staff, or does it make sense for them to just become this now do it electronically?
You're spot on in that they have to change and evolve with the medium of the information. So a person who may have spent their days doing record assembly of hard copy is going to have to learn how to use a PC and work within an electronic environment, and that role changes completely. So to your point, your question, the professionals within the health information area do have to change and evolve with the needs that are changing as the electronic medical record is implemented.
Interesting. And, I mean, many people look at the HIM professional really in their old branding, I guess you could say, as medical record staff, right? That really were just chart pullers and chart organizers. But I've been to AHIMA and I've been to the other events, and I think even you espouse the idea that the HIM department should be more of a strategic asset for the organization and not just chart pullers. What ways do you see that happening so that they can help with things like revenue cycle or quality of care?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing is they got to get out of the basement, right? So especially in some of the other facilities, the medical records department's almost always in the basement, and I think it's important for the HIM professionals to get out, reach out to the other departments and the other people involved within the facility, communicate with them, and especially to tell them where there's areas for improvement, in particular in the area of quality. And you get to that with documentation quality, CDI. There are a lot of areas where medical records is really they're kind of at the center of all this information that's going through, and the quality of the information, information governance, and they're really in the position to have a big impact and a positive impact on many facilities, but they have to reach out and communicate and work with the other groups. And there are some places where you've got departments that are forward-thinking, and they certainly have a place at the table, and they're working in conjunction with the clinical side, the administrative side. And then there are places where they're not, and they're kind of stuck in the old HIM world, and those are the places that are going to have a tougher time with the transition.
Interesting. I think you're right about the CDI stuff, especially as data becomes more important going forward as we start creating these smart systems and smart workflows that rely on quality data. I think the HIM professional can have an impact there. The other one we didn't talk about yet is liability. It's almost like they're a risk manager in many cases. Are you seeing the same? Can they help there?
Absolutely. So you've gotten increased scrutiny, especially in the privacy area with high-tech rules, and so there's more and more emphasis on having to make sure that those rules and privacy procedures are adhered to, because there is enormous liability, and we all see the information about breaches, whether they're single or multiple, and it is a real and a big concern. So I'd say that's one of the biggest areas of liability exposure within the HIM department. But then you've also got liability or you have financial risk with coding and the documentation, and if that's not being done well, that also exposes a hospital or provider to liability of different kinds.
Yeah, that's going to get worse with ICD-10. So, it's interesting you said. Say again.
We'll see with ICD-10. I think I'm one of the only people at our company that said it's actually going to go through next fall, and we've actually put odds on it at 7 to 10. So if you want some action, I know you're in Vegas, I'd be happy to.
I should put up a post. What are the odds of ICD-10? I'm taking bets.
Yeah.
I think I'd get a lot of involvement.
You get a lot of comments, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure we'd get a lot of people that are wanting to rank it for sure. Interesting. I like the idea of HIM needs to be out of the basement, right? And it needs to become a strategic asset. Sometimes I've wondered how many people really want to become strategic asset. How many HIM managers? Some do. Some are kind of like, wait, do I want to go that way? But even more so, getting out of the basement. One of the trends I've seen happening is this idea of a remote HIM department. I mean, literally out of the basement, right? In their own home. What are the advantages, disadvantages of doing that?
Yeah, so that is absolutely a trend, and I know most of the people that we're hiring these days are remote, and I know it's the same thing at the hospitals, especially on the coding side. So the advantages of having remote staff or workforce is certainly you've got a larger pool, candidate pool to staff from. There's certainly plenty of data that says that people are happier and they're more productive when they work from home. It allows you to allocate the work more effectively, and it's just kind of the next generation of the way things are. I think some of the disadvantages of a remote workforce are certainly culture and communication. If you're not seeing people on a daily basis or more regularly in person, it's very hard to build culture and to communicate, big and small things. And so I think that, if providers are going to entertain having a virtual health information management department, you really need to think about all the different systems and tools and procedures that you need to manage a remote workforce, because it's different.
So kind of related to this remote HIM department is, I've also seen many organizations that are saying, well, why don't we just outsource the whole HIM department to another company? Have you seen that, and what do you see happening there? Is that a good idea? Is that a bad idea? When is it a good idea?
I think I think it can be a good idea. I'm obviously biased because we do that, but I think it really depends on the facility. I think it depends on the size of the facility can impact it. So with some of the smaller, say it's 250 beds and below. I think it's difficult for them, or can be, to keep up with the staffing, the training and the education, the quality control, all the areas that are needed to keep your HIM department current and moving forward. And you also get a lot of places that, I hate to keep saying this, use the basement analogy, but where they haven't moved out, advanced with the way things are going, and so you've got legacy procedures, you've got duplication of process, and oftentimes people who are maybe overseeing or that the department reports to, whether it's a CIO or a CFO, they don't have enough of an in-depth knowledge of how things operate within the HIM department, so they don't know if you need 15, 20, or 7 FTEs to really do what's being done. And I think that there are companies out there like ours who specialize in these areas, and so they're constantly staffing and they're training, and they've got tools to look at the quality control and what how much production people should be doing. So take release of information. What's a fair number of records for someone to send out in one day? Or coding, how many records should they be coding? And so there's different metrics, that companies have to manage that, and can usually do it more efficiently. But it really depends on the facility.
Is that a challenge for you when you go into maybe one of these smaller ones that hasn't kept up to date? Do you almost have to go through like a consulting process to kind of say, hey, well, you're behind on this and this and that? Or what's the process when you go to an organization like that?
Yeah, that's exactly what the process is. So we'll usually go in, and depending on the size of the facility, we'll do a couple of weeks or a 30-day assessment where we'll send 1 or 2 people in who are very knowledgeable with where things should be as far as an HIM department, and they can look at different volumes and assess what the staffing should be, what the procedure should be, and we do this, and other companies do it. That's what we do, right? So we get to see how things are done at all kinds of different facilities and kind of pick best practices. Where if you don't have that knowledge, how do you know whether you're doing things well or whether you're efficient in your own department? So there is an assessment part to it, and it's usually pretty helpful when we go back to senior management and kind of tell them what we found.
Right. And do you usually take over the entire HIM department, or do you need to keep some staff there that facilitate your connection?
So, I'm not. So there's, I guess, two parts to that question. Do you take it remotely, or do we take over the whole department?
Yeah, I mean, I guess either way would be interesting, but are do I guess the core of the question is, do HIM staff lose their job because they go with you, or do they still need some people because they're going to facilitate you doing what you need to do?
So there's usually, we still need people to do it. We might not need as many people as were in there before, and oftentimes what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll interview people and we'll hire people that we think will be good fits for our organization.
So you may even keep some of the same people and doing the work, but just maybe hold them to a higher standard since you have a feel for what's reasonable.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And there maybe it's not a higher standard for those few people, right? There could be people that out of the group do a good job, and they're 3 out of 15. Yeah, I mean, if we can keep people that know the facility, they know the procedures, they're familiar with things, that's always helpful for a transition.
Sure. So let's say I'm a healthcare CIO at a hospital, or I guess maybe the CEO makes that decision, maybe a CFO, depending on who they fall under. It seems like the HIM department's getting split, half to CIO, half to CFO, depending on if it's clinical documentation improvement, maybe CFO. If it's kind of document management, it's CIO because of the EHR. But when they make that decision, like maybe we should go with an outsource, what differentiates a good outsourced HIM company from a great one? Obviously you're biased, but I'm interested to hear what differentiates you from your competitors.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a good question, and I would say it's really people, quality, accountability, and training and education. So we and I don't want to make this an advertisement for MRA, but we place a lot of emphasis on our people, and I think that it's a lack of a better term, it's a body business. So we'll use technologies and whatnot, but a lot of it is manual labor, and so we have it's important to us that we're hiring quality people, we're holding them accountable for what they're tasked to do within that job, and providing them with ongoing education and training. So I think some places, focus more on, hey, let's just get bodies there, and that just doesn't really work. So you need to have people that kind of buy into your culture. You need to be communicating with them and constantly training and assessing the work that they're doing.
Interesting. So you brought up two interesting points there. One is the idea that it requires bodies. Do you think that the technologies and things that are available, I mean, things like the EHR just pushing out the record automatically to the patient will kind of replace a lot of the work the HIM staff do, or do you think that we'll always need some bodies for the work that's being done?
You're always going to need some bodies. I think that the role of the person changes. So, if it's in a completely electronic format, take releasing the records, someone still has to review it, for privacy and make sure there's no sensitive information that's being released. You can use technologies to help that process. Same thing with coding, with computer-assisted coding. That's not going to eliminate coders. It just changes what they're doing. So they turn more into validators. There's more need for quality reviews, audits, and things like that. So I think technology will help bring efficiencies in many areas, but it's also going to create new roles and needs in new areas. So there will be the need for people to do stuff.
Interesting. I've hypothesized. In fact, I wrote this article about 8 years ago that maybe one day we'll have a video EHR that just records the entire visit, and basically that's easy documentation. You have exactly what happened. But even in that world, if you had 10 video cameras, video recording live everything that happened, probably an HIM professional would need to become a video editor to edit the parts that matter, right?
Right. Or then you're going to get into, you run into data issues, right? And compression and
Sure.
privacy of the video, and there's.
Yeah, there's a lot of tech questions there, and there's a lot of reimbursement questions as well. But
Right.
interesting.
Right.
So, the other thing you talked about was, how do you hold these people accountable? I think there's kind of two questions of accountability. One is, let's just say you have a remote HIM department. How do you hold those remote people accountable? And the second part would be, how do you hold, say you outsource some of your HIM functions to a company like yours? What's the best way for them to hold you accountable and know that you're performing what you need to?
So I think it's clearly transparency, reporting, metrics, dashboards. If we have remote workers, and we have many of them, we know what their productivity is like. They have to document that each day or each hour that they work. So we know that this inpatient coder should be coding on average 3 to 4 records per hour. If you get one that's a very long length of stay, that might throw that off a bit, but their average should be within these areas. And so we know that, and we track it and we look at it. And then on the same side, it's not just about production, but it's also about quality. So you need to make sure that you've got quality controls and reviews that you're doing to ensure that while this person is producing and they're doing the right pace, that the quality of work is there. And then we provide the facilities with reports on that, so they get kind of flash updates on, hey, here you are with, here's where things stand with your DNFB, or number of record requests, backlog, or turnaround time, or things like that.
Sure. It's interesting as you describe some of the accountability things. It almost feels like if you're not careful, you could create an environment that you're kind of putting them on a hamster wheel, where that you're like, churn out records, right? You can pressure. Yeah. How do you avoid that and avoid that culture of you better give me these many records or you're out? How do you approach that from a culture standpoint?
That is, we literally had a board meeting last month, and that was one of the biggest topics of it. With this new, kind of remote workforce, is how do you build culture? How do you make someone who's, sitting in Tucson in front of a PC all day feel like they're valued, and not just, cracking the whip saying you're not doing enough records, or you're not doing, enough abstracts, whatever it may be. I think, for us, we're launching a fairly aggressive employee appreciation program, and I think a lot of it comes down to rapport, and rapport is really hard to build remotely. So it's really about managers at all levels reaching out, getting to know the people that you work with and work for. We also use a platform called Yammer, which is like a in-house social media platform that allows people to communicate, and we try to promote that. But it's hard, and that's a nut that we're working hard to crack, because for us, the ship has certainly sailed on the virtual workforce, and we want to continue to promote a great culture. It's really important to us, so we're investing in that heavily.
Yeah. It's almost like you have to gamify the records. We do that in healthcare. We want to gamify the health app so that people actually use it. You almost have to gamify the medical record space. Whereas I like to say with my blogs, it's like playing a video game. Just my score is page views and dollar signs, not as opposed to gold coins.
Right. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Yep. Definitely. So, as you look at the HIM professional, the HIM department, where do you see the future? Where is it headed? And we kind of already talked about, will hospitals need these professionals in the future? But what's going to change with the HIM department?
Well, that's a great question, and it's something I think we're seeing a lot of it now, where there's multiple trends. I think that you're you're getting kind of the verticalization, if that's even a word, of different specialties, and then those specialties are getting reported up to different areas. So, coding is CDI, might go to finance, and release of information might go to IS. And so I think that can be good and bad. But I think you'll see more and more outsourcing because it's easier to do it that way. In that way, finance doesn't have to manage that or the outsource part of it, or the release of information function to a company that specializes in that. I think some of the other trends are information governance. I know that's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but I think it's certainly an important area that HIM can add a lot of value in.
Sure. Yeah, I did. One of my last hangouts was about the legal health record. I think that's an important topic. But a part of me wonders if it gets split between the CFO and the CIO, does it really kind of become two new departments? It seems like maybe that's a trend rather than one HIM department. Do you see that?
Well, the other trend, which actually I forgot to mention, that we see a lot of is you have increased consolidation and acquisitions within the hospital space. So you've got large groups acquiring smaller groups and hospitals forming alliances. And then the other trend that we're seeing quite a bit is the acquisition or the partnership with practices, clinics, and more of those. So you've got this large, and then centralization. So you might have an entity that has 3 or 4 hospitals and 50 to 80 practices. That's all one group, and then they're going to centralize and standardize all of the HIM. So all the information, the coding, and whatnot, and that makes a lot of sense so that you get some consistency and standardization. But that's another trend that we see happening. I think in the places where it does get kind of divided up, I don't know if it becomes 2 departments. I think they just kind of dissolve into those other areas that they get divided. But the functions still need to be done. So right. I personally don't think that's a good way to go about it, dividing it, because I think, as we discussed earlier, HIM can really be a valuable asset to your hospital, if it's used and done properly.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, we certainly have seen the consolidation, and in many ways you're like, why are we duplicating these resources? But then again, I've also talked to the people that are used to doing HIM for hospitals, and now they're doing ambulatory, and they're not sure what to do, which I think is the other challenge of that centralization.
Right.
So, yeah, the other question there, though, is, as I think about, these trends towards outsourcing, the trends towards centralization and larger HIM departments because they get bought, I think we're maybe entering the next stage, which we see over and over in the IT world, where, we need the data and servers in-house, and then you're like, now that they're in-house, the next CIO comes and says, no, wait, we should outsource it all. So you start outsourcing it all, right. And then after they start outsourcing, they come back in, the next CIO, wait, no, we need to bring them in-house because we had a breach or whatever. Do you think we'll see that same trend with outsourcing of HIM?
Yo-yo effect.
Yeah, there you go.
You get it. We'll see some of it. So, a new CFO comes in, right? They always want to look at every area and see if they can find areas to either generate revenue or cut costs. So, that'll happen, or they'll bring in a consulting firm like a HTI, and they'll look for areas to cut costs and or generate more revenue. And I think that can happen. I think we see it here and there. I don't know what you can do about it, but I think that there's a good, if you're a vendor and you can make the case to the provider with quantifiable facts of, hey, look, this is how many FTEs we use and this is the cost, and it makes sense for you to outsource it. Otherwise you do get that yo-yo effect. And I would say typically when people do bring it back in, 3 years later they bring it back out, right? Because they say, this is just a whole bag of headaches I don't want to deal with.
Yeah.
Let's deal with it.
Best, right? Great. Well, thank you so much for your insights. I appreciate you having you here, and we'll certainly have you back as we continue to watch the HIM profession evolve.
Great. Thank you for having me, John. I really appreciate it.